If you had told me at the beginning of the 21-22 season that by the February mark we would be making a video about Brandon Hagel and the amount of trade value that this guy apparently has in the market, I would have called you crazy, but you know what? This apparently is the situation going on at the moment, and when you take a look at all the factors as to why this is, and what has actually contributed to this conversation in the first place, it makes a lot more sense than it would have appeared if you told me this back at the beginning of the season. So, as we said, today we're talking about Brandon Hagel, Chicago Blackhawks forward, 23 years old. He was drafted by the Buffalo Sabres back in the 2016 NHL Entry Draft in the 6th round, 159th overall. So, just at the very least, a guy in the 6th round making the NHL, that's already a pretty good feat in and of itself. But, as we said, he was drafted by Buffalo, he was eventually let go, they didn't sign this guy, and after his stint with the Red Deer Rebels in the WHL, he signed a free agent contract with the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, this was in 2019, so it was 3 years after the draft. He didn't really do anything with Buffalo, and eventually, he had 102 points in 66 games for Red Deer, which is why he got that AHL offer. Give it a year, playing with Chicago and Rockford. He was pretty good with the Rockford Ice Hogs. In 2020-2021, though, he spent the start of his year in the Swiss League, where he was over a point per game, and then he made the Blackhawks full-time, getting 24 points in 52 games played. This season, though, Brandon Hagel, playing on a Blackhawks team that really isn't all too great, has 27 points in 45 games played, 14 goals, 13 assists, and it's a pretty good metric for a guy who's just kind of in the middle of the lineup over here, but what really makes Hagel so valuable is the fact that he is only 23 years old, that he is getting better, and that he's only making $1.5 million a season until 2024. This is a player that, considering the amount of production he has and what he's doing out there on the ice, not to mention the fact that he is pretty young, he's pretty much a big bargain of a package right here, and it's why the Chicago Blackhawks, according to Frank Seravalli, are getting a ton of calls on this guy. Initially, he said on the Daily Faceoff Rundown podcast that there are teams calling the Blackhawks and making some nice offers in an attempt to pry forward Hagel out in a trade. This article, by the way, NHLTradeTalk.com, I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description if you want to go ahead and read this. The inexpensive forward, who is having a fantastic season, has become quite the trade target, and Seravalli notes that the Chicago Blackhawks have been offered as much as a first-round pick and a top prospect for this dude. Holy. Talk about a valuable package, eh? Now, on the Daily Faceoff show, there are indeed two hosts. It is Frank Seravalli, and it is Jason Gregor. Gregor said he would take it if he was Chicago, but Seravalli did not think the Blackhawks would actually bite. He noted, "I don't think they're moving Hagel because I don't think they're going to get what they really need. The hint here is that the Blackhawks might see what other teams actually see, and they know they have a good player that is only going to get better on a very flexible contract. They're probably right, because even if his production dips at $1.5 million, he's still the type of player that will always be attractive to other teams." Now, for Hagel, that's just one part of the argument. Okay, teams are apparently going out there and offering a whole bunch of stuff for this guy. But leave it to Seravalli on dailyfaceoff.com, so we're going over onto a second article right here. This is the Brock Besser Canucks Trade Target Sport article. Seravalli wrote about which teams actually are involved in the Hagel talks. Let's go over as to what he says on the fourth. What do you even call this? Like, the fourth most valuable, or the fourth most likely to be traded, or the fourth most significant trade piece in play? Brandon Hagel, Chicago Blackhawks 23, 2 more seasons, 1.5 AAV. If you're looking for this year's version of a Blake Coleman or a Barclay Goodrow, look no further than Brandon Hagel, who has generated significant interest in Chicago. Provided that the Blackhawks' high price is met, he's a good bet to move, subject of course, to the opinion of Chicago's next GM. At least 4 teams are known to have engaged in conversation on Hagel: Florida, Toronto, New Jersey, and Calgary. The Flames likely moved on to Tyler Toffoli, which indeed happened. The Maple Leafs are focused on defense, which they did yesterday, but Hagel's contract and cost certainty is making teams drool. He is in first-round pick plus top prospect territory, which is understandable given the contract, his production, and his style of play. Now, because Calgary is kind of out, I guess we can go out there and say, Calgary, no more Brandon Hagel talks because they got their forward, they've got Tyler Toffoli, he's pretty good. let's go over to the other three teams here, Florida, New Jersey, and Toronto. Now, for the Toronto Maple Leafs, this is a team that just sent Ryan Dzingel down on waivers. If you really want to go out there and say that Dzingel is not going to be a part of this roster going forward, a guy like Brandon Hagel gives you a lot of flexibility into where he can slot into the lineup. Obviously, with the Maple Leafs, you're talking about cap space. With the Maple Leafs, you're talking about flexibility. Hagel provides that. $1.5 million is a pretty small amount of money considering what the Maple Leafs ended up getting off the board with that Nick Ritchie contract yesterday as well. Brandon Hagel also making this amount of money for the next few seasons would be fantastic as long as he continues to improve, which, I mean, he's only 23 years old and he's playing his second full season in the NHL, so I think it's a pretty good bet to believe that he will improve. 27 points over 45 games played on a bad Chicago team. Do the math on that, multiply things out by 82. He's on pace for 49 points, which is really not bad for a $1.5 million caliber player. So, for Toronto, I could totally understand why they're in on this guy. They really want some extra depth helping them out into the playoffs. As for Florida, you can go out there and say the same thing, although the argument could be made that Florida is already pretty good depth-wise with their forwards. Like, you have everybody in the top 9 going out there and scoring a crazy amount of points. What more can a Brandon Hagel add to the rest of this lineup? And furthermore, you want to say, okay, Brandon Hagel's going out there playing in Chicago. You take a look at the line mates he's been playing with. Sure, earlier on in the year, he was playing with guys like Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. He'd get a shift or two with Kirby Dach once in a while. But, I mean, everybody in Florida is good enough that I don't think Hagel's production would significantly decline if he was sent to a team like that. And then you have New Jersey, which is probably like the most interesting team that we have seen in all these trade talks over the past few weeks, talking about guys like Connor Garland, Brock Besser, and now Hagel as well. It's no secret that the Devils are not as good as all the other teams we've discussed over here. Calgary, Toronto, Florida, they're all pretty good, right? New Jersey is at the bottom of the entire Eastern Conference, or they're second last because Montreal exists. But they're right there in the midst of being bad, and they're gonna get themselves a good draft pick this season, so if you really wanted to go out there and say that New Jersey is just on the cusp of really turning it around and becoming a playoff wildcard contender, then sure, I can understand you trying to go after a guy like Connor Garland from the Canucks, or Besser from the Canucks as well, or Hagel from the Blackhawks. It makes sense, but if the price of any of these players involves a first-round pick, you're going to be forced to trade away a 2023 first or a 2024 first because you're not touching your 2022 first-round pick this year in a season where you're so bad that you're going to get yourselves a top 5 pick, right? You're not trading away a top 5 selection for Brandon Hagel, especially if that price that Chicago is potentially looking for involves a first-round pick and another prospect. If it's New Jersey sending over, like, I don't know, just for the sake of argument, Luke Hughes as well as a first overall pick, or not a first overall pick, heck, it might be first overall because they're so far down in the standings, you're not trading away first overall and Luke Hughes for Brandon Hagel of all people. I could totally understand the playoff teams going out there and giving up a price like that. Toronto trades away their first-round pick, which might be in the 20s anyway, alongside Rodion Amirov for Brandon Hagel. Or Florida trades away Grigory Denisenko, as well as their first-round pick for Hagel. Sure, long-term, this could be pretty good for Chicago if the prospect they get works out, and if they're able to make good on the pick that they use, but at the end of the day, it's not really going to come from a bad team, right? New Jersey, probably not going to go ahead and do this if I had to go out there and make a bet. So, if you're a Blackhawks fan, talk to me in the comments. What do you think Brandon Hagel should be worth on the market? Is this first-round pick and a prospect price good enough for you? Are you saying, okay, that's a little much for a guy like Brandon Hagel? He is super valuable, and he is pretty good. Not to mention the fact that he is so cheap on the contract side of things that, you know, holistically, just taking a look at all the things combined, I could totally understand why teams are going out there and offering packages that are apparently this big, according to Frank Seravalli. So this might be one of the bigger trades that we see by the time the trade deadline comes around, of course, assuming the Chicago Blackhawks actually decide to trade this guy. So if you're a fan of the Devils, the Leafs, the Panthers, or the Flames, let me know in the comments, what do you think about this player? What is the most you would give up to get this kind of guy added onto your squad? And if you're a Calgary Flames fan, do you still want this player? Like, you already have Toffoli. Is there a need to get a Brandon Hagel added onto your squad as well? Let me know in the comments all your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video. Trolls 99. And bye.